Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Be Your Own Bank podcast. We have a very special weekly roundup for you this week.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. So this week, we want to talk about a very important thing that happened in the news. 6 of the top CEOs and crypto executives met with Congress last week, and they were there as key witnesses to discuss basically what could become new regulations in the crypto sphere, answer questions to Congress. And it was just a really nice sort of forum for these experts to kind of share their information with congressional members and Congress to understand a little bit better what they are regulating and how to do it in a more efficient and helpful way for everybody. So we had 6 of the top executives, 2 from exchanges FTX and Coinbase. We had 1 representing Stellar Lumen, and then we had 2 executives that are specifically focused on stablecoins. So we have US Dollar Coin and Paxos Standard Dollar. They were both there to answer questions about stablecoins.
And you might think like 5 hours of congressional testimony sounds really exhilarating. And you'd be right, actually, because it was pretty great. I honestly thought it was going to be like a bunch of accusatory gotcha questions and stuff where it was like, you know, Congress like just trying to make crypto look bad or trying to overregulate and all this stuff. And it was quite the opposite. It was very respectful. Everyone was like, oh, thank you for the question. And, oh, it's so great to see you again, Congressperson. And it was refreshing to see that like adults were having a conversation about finance. And
it was bipartisan too.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't really tell who was Democrat, who was Republican.
I couldn't.
At all. And I was just surprised that it wasn't, well, what about the dark web,
right,
and what about hackers and ransomware? And some of that came up, but it wasn't accusatory like we thought it could be,
right,
easily could be. Or
ignorant for that matter.
Right. A lot of the Congress people were very well educated on the topic of blockchain, of crypto, and their questions showed that they had some background before even coming into this hearing.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Because when, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, when Zuckerberg came in and everybody was just like, how does Facebook make money? Which is like the most basic question. But these Congress people were asking blockchain questions. They were, you know, asking about efficiency and all this stuff. And it was just, I was blown away at, you know, just how interesting the questions and conversation was, but also just that it felt like the ball was moving forward. It didn't feel like they were caught up and didn't know how to figure out what to do with crypto.
Well, and it started out with them saying, you know what, this is already regulated. We need to create a better framework for regulation so that we're not stifling this industry and this innovation, because they know that this is the future. It was almost a $3 trillion market, and they're seeing the potential and how it could potentially affect government and banking in the United States.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the overarching theme was that everyone agreed that crypto is good and crypto is the future and crypto is where everything is moving. How do we make the rules around it? That was ultimately what everything was about.
And how do we stay competitive in a global market and maintain that the dollar has global dominance when it does now, but it could lose that if we can't be cooperative with this new emerging market.
All right, so let's dive into this. Let's start with infrastructure. So we talked about, they talked about Web 3.0. I think that's really interesting because I didn't really know what Web 3.0 was until a couple of weeks ago. So let's explain that for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best way to start with what Web 3.0 is to start with what Web 1.0 is. And so if you go back in time to sort of the AOL days when we were, you know, just getting onto the web, that's Web 1.0. And basically in a nutshell, what it is that you have content that you're interacting with in terms of just reading. So you're going to a website, kind of like a New York Times newspaper, and you're just reading content. You're digesting content, and that's about it. It's sort of passive news. And then we moved to Web 2.0, which is where we are now. And that's where we add that engagement, that interaction where you are not only viewing and taking in content, but you're also adding content.
The blogosphere.
Blogosphere through social media. You're creating content with, comments on people's pages or whatever. It's the content creation and engagement phase of the internet. And we've been there for decades.
But the problem with that is that who owns your content, right? It's the big five is what they said. They said there's 5 companies who basically own your content, which is a scary thing. But, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do about YouTube? What are you going to do about, Facebook, and Google in general, right? It's that's the problem, is that if you have a show or like a podcast, like the Be Your Own Bank podcast, and people subscribe, which I recommend subscribing to on YouTube, then that's how monetization happens. And, we get paid for our content, but we get paid a fraction of what we could be getting paid for our intellectual property. So definitely go ahead and subscribe to the Be Your Own Bank podcast, specifically the Bit Bros on YouTube. And that will help the big 5 make more money, but it'll also help the little 2 make some money too.
But I mean, that's the point, right? Is Google and all these huge corporate conglomerates, they get to decide the market. They get to decide how much they're paying you, how much content is worth, how much you're worth as a content provider. And they pull all the strings. So now we move into Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is this idea of content ownership, individual decentralized content ownership. So now we're moving to where, you don't have to go to GoDaddy and rent a website. Now you can own a website.
Yep.
And it's all verified and tracked and stored on a blockchain. So there's less issues with downtime as well. I mean, you look at Facebook had this like 6-hour outage and it cost them billions of dollars, and people can't access their social media, which is probably good because then they can go outside and have, some fresh air. But either way, the problem is we are relying on this huge conglomerate to maintain network stability. And with decentralization, Web3, it's all spread out in this sort of neural network that allows for less of that to happen and makes it more secure, more efficient. And the individuals who are creating content are the ones that are gaining from it. It's not these third parties.
It's a transfer of wealth.
Yeah.
So you're finally able to make money off of your intellectual property, which makes perfect sense. Why haven't we done that? Well, now we are. And that's why Web 3.0 is so cool, because as the Coinbase CEO said, that crypto has now gone from the investment phase into the utility phase. So now we're actually using crypto as not only a store of value, but as a transactional, utilizing it literally, which is just phenomenal that they're acknowledging that in Congress now too,
Absolutely. And we're moving from this sort of old economics to a new economics and new communities where we're as creators are creating the economy, and it's becoming the sort of play to earn. So in the gaming space, this is going to be huge. We're already doing it now. There's this thing called Sandbox where you can actually buy digital property, you can rent it out, you can design on it, and it's all provable on the blockchain that you have ownership of this property.
And it's transparent.
That
everything is transparent. Anyone can verify that person owns that piece of content or that website or whatever. So it's the crowd is in charge now, and they are going to dictate the value of things, which is what it should be. And I think the fact that what they spoke about, in this hearing was that's where we are going, and we need to embrace that.
Absolutely. Yeah. They didn't deny that at all, that we are moving in this direction. It's like they see these experts of the trade and they're like, how can we make this easier for you guys, for us to regulate, and for your community that wants to be invested so that we can stay competitive. I think the next thing we want to talk about throughout the hearing is access.
Yep.
Access in terms of ease of access, I think, is more specific to these financial services.
Well, and I think that was a concern of some of the Congress people, was that it was like because they represent us, right? They should. And so there were some Congress people who would speak up and say, well, in my district, we have, percentages of low income people. How does this affect them? How can this benefit them? And I thought that was interesting because it's like, of course you do. But some of these congressmen actually do represent these communities that are completely underserved. And so crypto is a huge benefit to those people. And I think that was reiterated as well.
Well, and yeah, they said that there are more minority investors in crypto than white investors in the U.S.
I didn't know that.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Especially with these underserved communities. They talked about these two important terms, underbanked and unbanked.
Yep.
Unbanked meaning you don't have a bank account, and underbanked meaning you don't have as much access, right?
Right.
And so crypto can solve that because you really just need a phone. And with Stellar's CEO saying that they're partnering with this company called Leaf that allows for, refugees to move their money across borders without having to have physical cash in hand. They don't even need smartphones. I looked it up and they can have just a regular phone and still have access to their money. So it allows people that don't have banking services, that are in underprivileged areas, to still have power over their money and be their own bank.
Well, and I think too, the point that they made was, and I think it was Brooks, who he had said that exclusively to invest in things, you have to be an accredited investor, which just basically means you have a bunch of money. So with this, it doesn't exclude people if you're not an accredited investor. So you can be, since it's still so new, this whole industry, this crypto space, since it's still new, you can still get in early without a lot of assets and grow your assets and be part of this wealth phase, and actually grow wealth with crypto. And I thought that was super fascinating because that's what, I've seen it, like personally. So for them to be able to, explain it in a way that's like, it's not too late. You don't have to be rich to get rich. You can start now. And because we're still in these beginning phases of this market, you have a really great opportunity to grow wealth.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen people in our own personal lives that we've gotten into this that have started small with, $10-20,
yep,
maybe a month. And now they're sitting on a couple $1,000s because they've been consistent.
Yep. They
believe in the process, and it proves itself.
It has.
It has proven itself. Yeah.
And,
over time.
Now, once we get, the sign off of Congress, which, man, did it look like they were on board the whole time for 5 hours,
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a single congressperson who was like, this is not for me, which blew me away. I thought for sure there'd be a few that were against it.
Oh, absolutely. And I found out later that, unsurprisingly, I feel like some of these Congress people have already invested in crypto.
Right.
So they're invested in it.
And they know a lot about
it, and they're willing to take the advice and even some of the policy recommendations from these executives to create transparency and clarity in these regulations. But one huge thing that they talked about, which I think is Congress's one of their main roles, is risk, managing and mitigating risk. And I think one key thing that they said before they even got into asking questions about the risk of crypto and blockchain is they said, we're not about eliminating risk, just about managing it for the American people, basically. And so the big question was volatility. These coins can go up and down and quickly, and people could lose a lot of money. How do we manage that risk for someone who maybe doesn't have a lot to lose or invest? How do we manage that?
Yeah, and I think it was Brooks again who was talking about this graph, this chart, this exponential growth. And comparing the crypto market, still considering it that it's only 13 years old, right? And he was comparing it to the U.S. securities market, which is over 100 years old. And he was saying the charts are the same. The charts look the same. There's more volatility in the securities market earlier on. People are just kind of finding the value of things. And so he was like, it completely correlates to the U.S. securities market, which was securities market meaning the stock market, Dow Jones, NASDAQ. That was S&P 500, right? So those arguments of, well, it's more volatile, they're not. That's not true.
Well, and they said too that every revolution, quote revolution, has volatility in the early days, and we're still in the early days.
We are.
I mean, $2.2 trillion market right now. Bitcoin or gold is 10 trillion.
Yep.
So we've got so much room to grow. And I think the other thing that they said too was, Brooks said this, 80% of Bitcoin hasn't moved.
That was the wildest thing.
Blew my mind.
Yeah.
So all this volatility that's happening right now, dropping from 68,000 to 46,000.
Yep.
Is institutions just moving money around.
Big whales.
Yeah.
Yeah. People with lots of Bitcoin because they got in when Bitcoin was 4 cents or whatever. Don't you wish?
Or they got in late and they're just trying to play the scalping game.
Sure, but 80% of people that have purchased Bitcoin have never sold it.
Yeah, because they believe in it. They see it as a store of value.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's probably the coolest statistic of the 5 hours.
Right. Well, and it just shows that even though there's volatility, there's a lot of trust in this system.
Well, and time will show, that it's not a bad choice, that it's in fact a great choice, and you're still in early.
Yeah.
So,
and then one of the other Congress people asked the Coinbase rep, Haas, her last name's Haas, how do you manage risk when banks have the FDIC to insure people's money? So if your account gets hacked or whatever, the FDIC insures you up to $250,000. So what measures does Coinbase take as an exchange, because they're not insured necessarily, to mitigate that risk? And so she said 98%. Well, first of all, she said 12% of all crypto in the world is held in custody by Coinbase.
Another crazy statistic.
12% of that 2.2 trillion Coinbase has in their custody. That's absurd.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money. That's hundreds of billions of dollars. And how are they maintaining that it doesn't get hacked? Because hacks do happen. And Congress pointed out that Coinbase did get hacked. 6,000 of their accounts got hacked. But Coinbase said, here's the deal. 98% of our money is stored in cold wallets. So offline, flash drives, hard drives, whatever. 2% is in hot wallets. So at any given time, the most they could lose is 2% of their money. And that's easily covered by all the profits that they make.
Yeah.
So those 6,000 accounts that got hacked, just totally, they took the hit on that.
Well, and it's funny too, because the amount of risk, just investing in general, the amount of risk that you're supposed to take on each position is 1% to 2%. So it's completely in line with just investing strategy in general. So 2% is completely negligible. They can pay everybody out, no problem. So I would say there's next to no risk in Coinbase.
Next to no risk in Coinbase for sure. And then, we look at stablecoins, and we'll get to that next. There's even less risk. But the other big question about risk that they asked was, what about the bubble?
Yep.
What about the bubble? In 2017, we had this 90% drop in the crypto sphere.
I think it was 83, but yes.
Okay, but it was high, yeah. Right? And people getting in on their Shiba Inus and their Dogecoins who are trying to hit the moonshot.
It's gonna hit a penny. Shiba's gonna hit a penny.
Never hit a penny.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna be rich.
They could lose a lot of money. I mean, we talked to a new friend of ours who owns a company, and he's saying that his chefs who are making maybe $3,000 a month are putting a lot of that into some of these coins, and if the price drops 80%, that's a lot of money. So how is this risk going to be managed? Is it a bubble? That was the question.
Yeah, well, and I think the other piece of it was the transparency. So Bankman-Fried, who's the FTX CEO, he's a character. I like him a lot.
I like him a lot. He's a PhD in physics from MIT.
Yep.
So he's got the credentials.
Well, he's got just kind of this nerdy guy who knows a lot of information, and he's very polite and accommodating. But what he was explaining, which makes sense to me now, is the crypto market is 24/7. Right. And we talk about transparency, where every transaction is transparent. Anyone can verify that transaction took place once it's been verified, of course. Right. And so the 24/7 aspect, which is stressful because you can never shut it off. Right. It's like you're constantly checking your phone and you're like, it's going up, or I just want a Sunday off where I don't have to worry about crypto.
Yeah.
But in the stock market, it's only, I believe we're in Central Time. So 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. is the market, the day, right? So if you get in before the market, you're subject to these big spikes, these big moves, these big gaps. So it can either gap up or it can gap down at the beginning of the day. So you can see, yes, crypto is volatile, and you'll see a giant, down or up candle on the charts. But in the stock market, you'll see these actual gaps in the charts, where the beginning of the day starts higher or far lower. And so it's harder to manage that when you don't know, like you wake up and you're waiting for 8:30 a.m. just to see where the market's going to go. So Fried was arguing that that's a better situation, because you can manage risk better in that situation than you can if there's these, because if you, on the stock market, if you wake up and the bell rings and the market's down 2,000 points, what's going to happen? Panic selling, right? Is the people are gonna be like, oh man, I gotta sell. Whereas with the crypto market, because it's so fast, you'll see it go down 2,000, you'll see it come back up 2,000. So you have a little bit more time to be rational and be less emotional about it.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's not to say that we won't be in a bubble again.
Sure.
But I mean, there's a lot of ways to still maintain value in the market without all of this crazy risk.
Well, and talking about like the subprime mortgage crisis, right? Which is what caused the 2008 crash, which quickly was people who couldn't afford to get mortgages for homes were given them by the bank basically with no credentials. So you didn't have to have, it was very lax.
No credit checks.
No proof of employment. Some of these loans were just completely ridiculous. Plus the interest rates were fluctuating, and the appraisers would appraise for higher values on homes. And so the bank would issue these mortgages that were going to default, guaranteed, and people couldn't pay for them. Then the market started to take a dip, the housing market. And so people couldn't offload houses. These banks took the mortgages, sold them to investment banks. The investment banks turned them into securities, sold them out. Those securities default. Everybody loses money. And it's just mass hysteria. So since we've had the Dodd-Frank Act, which has remedied that.
But at the root of all of this is zero transparency.
Correct.
These are banks to banks doing these sort of shady deals, and there's no accountability for their ledgers. We can't go and look at Goldman Sachs. Right. We can't look at
Lehman Brothers.
We can't look at their records and be like, oh, you guys are double way over leveraging.
Yep.
We can't do that. But with crypto, you can see where the money is going. And so that over time is going to help reduce volatility the more people that get into it.
And you have a lot of people checking on that. You have a lot of people who have a vested interest in that being successful, and more people not being able to take advantage of a broken system because the system's on the blockchain in perpetuity.
And open source.
Yep.
So everyone can view it and audit it. Enough about risk. We're going to jump into stablecoins. Stablecoins was a huge point of interest for Congress, especially with them talking about dollar dominance.
Yes.
One thing that came out of this discussion, so we have Circle's CEO and we have Paxos's CEO. Both of them run companies that mint cryptocurrency stablecoins. So Circle is US dollar coin, and Paxos is Paxos dollar. But they also have a gold-backed coin as well. So they're not just focused on that, but that's what they were talking about in Congress. And one huge thing that we found out about them is not only are they regulated, but for every crypto stable coin that is minted, they have a 1-to-1 backed dollar in reserves.
Dollar or treasury bond bill, something that's liquid.
Yes, that's worth $1. It could be exchanged for dollars. And that's huge.
So the idea is the 1-to-1 gives the dollar dominance, gives the dollar the gold standard. You've heard of the gold standard, which was basically before 1970, something like that. All dollar bills were backed by gold. So gold isn't the standard anymore because they keep printing money.
Yeah, the reason basically it was a reserve currency for other countries too, but there just isn't enough gold for how much money is printed.
Correct.
So that you can't use it to back it anymore.
So it becomes a fiat currency. When we talk about fiat, it just means backed by the government. So the U.S. government is, I guess, arguably one of the most trusted governments. That seems like an oxymoron, but in the world. So the fact that they go $1, we got you. If we don't have enough gold reserves to cover the dollars, we got you anyways. We'll figure it out, which nobody's called them on that. But the idea is this fiat currency is the most trusted. So everybody in the world wants dollars. And what's wrong with that is that some of these other countries are starting to, do better, and China's really competing with us. And this is the global reserve currency that the US dollar is right now, because everybody wants it, may be at risk. And that's the point with stable coins is, who's the Circle CEO? He said that
Jeremy Allaire.
He said that the dollar is at risk because it doesn't have features. It's not into the future of the economy is features. So he compared the US dollar versus the stable coin. He said the US dollar is like a mailed letter, like an old school snail mail letter. And crypto and USDC stablecoin is like an email. So it goes as fast as the internet, right? It has features. It's the capabilities of a USD stablecoin backed by the dollar has far more power than an actual physical paper dollar.
Well, and if we want to maintain our place as the global reserve currency, then we need to allow our currency to have those features that allow other people across the world to have access to the dollar faster,
right,
and more efficiently.
And if they have access more, they're going to want to use the dollar more. Yep. So the dollar is going to benefit, and we will still be able to I think, what was it, Brooks, who said the currency space race, where it's just this is the new competition.
It's the new space race, and we're kind of losing to China and some of these other countries that have gotten their shit together and figured out how to regulate it with concise verbiage. And I mean, China's already working on the central banking digital currency. So Congress was asking, will this threaten the dollar? We're worried about stablecoins threatening the dollar. Will it devalue it or whatever? And basically what they're saying is, not only will it not threaten the dollar, but it will strengthen the dollar.
It'll bolster the dollar.
It'll strengthen the dollar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is so cool. And they seemed in agreement with that.
And I didn't know about that before either. I was just I had trust in it because I trust the crypto, right?
Well, and we trust Coinbase, who issues US dollar coin.
And so, but it was so fascinating to learn more about these stable coins and what the benefit of stable coins are, and how this, the future transactions will be, facilitated by stablecoins, and how most investments are bought with stablecoins, which is cool too, is that people aren't using their fiat. They're using stablecoins to purchase their investments.
Yep. Absolutely. Because it's faster and can be even cheaper too.
Earn interest too, right?
You can earn interest, like crazy interest. But they also, I feel like it might be important to note that they were asking about what's better than us just focusing on these stable coins that are already working, being used, like US dollar coin, or working towards creating a central bank digital currency. What's the difference? What's better? What's worse? And basically they said stablecoins are more accessible, and a central bank digital currency is going to be less accessible because you're still going to need a bank, right?
Well, and that was the piece. The Bitcoin has no CEO. So crypto is the crowd, right? The crowd is in charge of the value. It's not, you don't have people who need to put a percentage in their pockets to make it work. And so I think the CBDC would be, there would be too much meddling. Yes. Could it work? Will it work? Yeah, probably it will. We probably will have it at some point in the very near future, but it's still not as efficient as the completely decentralized model.
But it seemed to me, and correct me if you saw something different, it seemed to me like the Circle CEO's argument was, rather than creating a new currency, just integrate
Circle,
US dollar coin.
Right.
Because then you get the best of both worlds. And I feel like our government does that. We're way more focused on utilizing third parties that already have it figured out than creating a committee to come up with something new.
And if you think about it too, it wasn't, hey, let me sell you my product.
No.
Right? Like normally it's like mergers and acquisitions, we'll just buy out stablecoin, but that's not how it works. It's, hey, it's open source. Our technology is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Here, we're telling you, does the USA want to be USA forever? Well, here's a good way to stay on track for that.
Yeah. Spoon fed right to them. The next thing we got is we kind of just want to compare old banking versus new banking, which I think was a staple of this congressional hearing, and what crypto blockchain offers over traditional banking. So we've got the main thing, which we just talked about, which is open source. And open source allows for full transparency. So we talk about a Venmo transaction.
Yeah, that was interesting too.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm guessing most people use Venmo now.
Yep.
I would assume because it's
the US.
free in the US. Yeah.
Right.
Or Zelle. I was at the airport coming back from Washington, and I saw this huge advertisement that said, Zelle, send money almost anywhere. Almost. That's what I focused on.
Yeah.
Send it almost anywhere. Venmo's the same way. Almost anywhere, right? And what we don't realize is that for each Venmo transaction, there's like 7 different steps that happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's what Brooks was saying, was that it was a third party to third party, whereas crypto is first party to first party.
Right, I like that.
So there's, you have to tell your bank what to do, and then they tell their underwriters or, people that are in charge of making transactions what to do. Then they tell their computers, and their computers tell the other bank's computers, and it's just convoluted, takes time. That's why when you try to get Venmo out of your bank or out of your Venmo, you try to get Venmo out of your Venmo. Is that what I said?
Yeah, that makes sense. Your money out of your Venmo?
Money out of your Venmo. When you try to get money out of your Venmo, they say 1 to 3 business days, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't include weekends, right?
No, it doesn't include weekends.
Or we'll take 1.5% up to $15 or whatever, right? And so crypto completely eliminates all of that hassle.
And it eliminates the almost anywhere to everywhere.
Right. Borderless.
It's borderless. Well, the other issue is you got 7 different steps going on in a Venmo transaction you don't know about. Not transparent.
No.
And there's 7 different steps where errors could occur.
Correct.
Versus you have a full transparency blockchain system where there's point A to point B. And the only error that can occur is user error if you send it to the wrong address. Brooks said it so well. He's like, he's got decades of experience in the financial sector, banking. And he's like, I remember being on a board of creditors deciding who gets this credit. And he's like, there's a possibility that I could have been susceptible to implicit bias.
Yep.
And he said what blockchain and open source algorithms do is they don't suffer from implicit bias. Humans are subject to bias, he said, greed, error, negligence, and fraud. Algorithms get rid of all of that.
Yes. So bias, greed, error, negligence, and fraud. None of that exists in the crypto space.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
That's why we have more access for people that normally wouldn't be able to get into the financial sector.
Correct.
Because it's all gone. There's no bias. There's no greed. There's greed in terms of people, but the algorithm doesn't have any of that.
Well, and that's what Brooks said too. He said big banks are the biggest, critics of crypto because they have the most to lose.
They have the most to lose, and then they can't be as greedy and biased as they want to. The other thing they talked about was the efficiency of banking through blockchain.
Yeah.
I didn't know this, but at any given time, there are trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars that are just held up in the traditional banking system waiting to clear or to be verified. And that people are losing money. Systems are losing money because it's slow.
Well, that goes back to the Venmo, point, right? Is that there's all this money that's being hung up because so many things have to happen in order for you to get your money.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Stellar CEO said one Stellar transaction takes 3 to 5 seconds, and 100,000 Stellar transactions cost less than a penny.
Yeah.
3 to 5 seconds, 100,000 less than a penny. I didn't even know it was that low. That's insane. And they're working with MoneyGram and, working on these borderless payments where you can actually send money to family out of the country.
Yeah.
Whereas what we talked about with Venmo and Cash App, it's only the US and the Great Britain. That's it. Those are the only choices. But with Stellar and crypto, 3 to 5 seconds?
3 to 5 seconds, 100,000 transactions for a penny.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. And then the last thing they kind of talked about in terms of old versus new banking is the idea of self-custody.
Right.
Custody being who holds your money. Banks hold your money, so they're the custodians of your finances, but crypto allows you to have self-custody. You're not paying a middleman to store your money. You're not paying overdraft fees. You're not paying,
minimum balance
fees.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Don't get me started with
wire
that.
transfer fees,
check cashing fees.
Oh my God.
None of the fees. You're only paying
overdraft fees.
1 penny to send your money.
Yeah.
Right. Or less than.
Well, and just to clarify though, self-custody, yes, you can, but Coinbase is a custodian. So
yeah, you should know that. Yeah,
you can choose.
Coinbase is a custodian, so they're basically a crypto bank, but they're not selling or lending your money.
Right. Which is, for me, I trust Coinbase more than I trust myself.
I trust Coinbase more than myself, but I also trust them more than my bank.
Well, for sure, that's a no-brainer.
So next we have, we've talked a little bit about it, but efficiency. We want to talk, kind of condense what their conversations were about efficiency.
Well, and I think we talk about environmental impact too, because that's a huge thing. And I think that's the main argument of people who are against crypto is, well, it's the consumption of Argentina or blah, 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 blah.
Or each Bitcoin transaction costs $100.
Right. Which isn't true.
I think the misconception there is that each individual transaction costs $100. I think that isn't accurate because each Bitcoin transaction could be upwards of 2,500 transactions at a time.
Oh, okay.
Because you're looking at a block.
Right.
A block is upwards of 2,500 transactions. So if you divide that by $100, that's 4 cents a transaction.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It's harder to figure out exactly per transaction.
Right.
Is it bad for the environment? Bitcoin specifically? Yes, it is.
In comparison, is it bad?
No.
If you're looking at like actual coal mining or iron mining, no.
But
it does need to get better. And countries like El Salvador are using volcanoes, and you have wind energy, all of that, renewables, and then these new coins that are staking that don't require any mining at all.
Right. Well, and I think
it's going to eliminate that.
That's the innovation piece too. And that's what the Stellar CEO was saying was that, not only the Stellar transaction, she mentioned that a Stellar transaction costs less energy than a Visa transaction, which I thought was fascinating. And then the fact that, we're doing the whole community, the crypto community wants to do better and is challenging each other to do better. And the incentive is obviously if you have a crypto that costs less, is more efficient, uses less energy, then more people are going to adopt that. So that competition that capitalism is all about,
Right.
is going to make crypto more efficient.
Yeah. The competition is going to breed quality.
Right.
And it already is proving itself. So that argument doesn't really.
Well, and
land
moving
anymore.
from proof of work to proof of stake. Proof of work being mining and proof of stake being staking. So
Yeah,
it's-
I mean, there's all these other different types of algorithm, proof of community,
sure.
you know,
We don't have
proof
to-
of space
we
and
don't
time. I'm just saying that there's
It's evolving.
It's evolving,
Yeah.
constantly evolving to be more efficient, secure, and sustainable. Next, we have security. Security is huge, especially in this growing internet world where there's constant attacks, people trying to steal intellectual property, money, bank accounts, whatever. That's never going to go away. So how is this technology going to help that or mitigate that?
Right.
One of the questions that was so interesting to me, but the way that they answered it was just proving or telling, I guess, of how powerful this technology is they're like, is there any technology out there that is more secure than blockchain?
Yeah.
They asked Brooks this, and Brooks was like, you know what? I'm going to pass this over to my physicist friend here. PhD. And so they passed the question. He was like, yeah, there's nothing more secure than blockchain except for other blockchains.
Yep.
And I mean, that just said it right there. It said it all.
So it has everything. It has transparency, it has security, it has efficiency. Yep. Interesting. Yeah. The other thing they talked about was that I didn't know was that the Colonial Pipeline that got hacked, and so Colonial Pipeline got hacked. I think we talked about it briefly, but the bad guys they asked for Bitcoin.
Ransomware, it's called.
Ransomware, right?
Yep.
So the bad guys asked to be paid out in Bitcoin, which was a huge mistake because they could trace it because it's on the blockchain and it's transparent.
Well,
so they were caught because they asked for Bitcoin.
Well, I should say too that they must have had an address that was linked to FTX's exchange. And because they require this know your client verification, these hackers were kind of dumb. Were actually really dumb because whatever address they had in the ransomware saying pay us was linked to, part of it was linked to an FTX account. So FTX is like, well, yeah, we know exactly where this came from. So here are the guys.
Yeah. Well, and they said, one of the congressmen said, you know, what happens if it gets hacked, or how easy is it to hack, or, you know, Brooks said one bad guy couldn't hack it. Like you couldn't normally in the old school, one bad guy could hack a system.
Yeah. A regular system takes one bad actor to overtake, but a blockchain system takes thousands of simultaneous bad actors to potentially.
But they're being watched at all times.
Right. So if there's anyone trying to do something bad, it's either going to be denied by the blockchain or the community is going to see it.
Right.
And
so it's almost impossible.
Supported.
It's so very secure.
Yeah.
Like that was the reiterating that I think was super important, especially for Congress because, you know, security, right? And it's, you know, all of the things that have been said are true. That's the thing is there's so many components of this that are good and are going to help people and governments too.
Well, and one of the Congress people kind of further supported the integrity of blockchain by saying, you know, we don't need perfection, which blockchain is almost to the point of perfection when it comes to fraud. He's like, but our current Medicare system we utilize, we're okay with, and has 18% fraud provider.
Right.
Like fraud is 18% of the providers.
Built into the budget because of 18% fraud.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's huge.
Crazy.
So security has proven itself
not an issue.
Be not an issue with
not
blockchain.
An issue. In fact, can help actually find these people and reverse engineer these transactions and get money back.
Yeah.
Because you know, these FTX and Coinbase, all these companies are working in cybersecurity too,
and they're compliant. And they the thing that was so impressive to me is they're not only following the regulations that exist and trying to come up with better clarity, but they're going above and beyond and doing more with integrity and tracking of information that the government could use that they didn't even have to do.
Right.
So they're trying to be above bar. They're trying to be these trailblazers of the industry and
they're like
models.
They're like the kid in high school, you know, who's like, hey, can I get some extra credit? Like, literally, like I feel that way. Like they're not only the smartest kid in the room, but they're always like, hey, can I get some extra credit? I'm bored here.
Well, and it's taking the banking industry from these suits, these sociopathic suits to these nerds that are actually, you know, the straight A students.
Don't you want them running the country? Don't you want them running the financial system as the people who really do care? The people who are in it for the right reasons instead of the people who are all about greed.
Right.
It's such a no-brainer.
Because if you want to design a system that's decentralized, democratic, and allows everyone to make a decision, and you're designing that system, you as a person, you can't really be that greedy.
You can't.
You can't.
No. Especially if you're going to get caught, because like, you know, the altruism aspect of crypto is just the most brilliant, fascinating piece of it. Is just it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of good, I think.
Agreed. It's I mean, for some people, it's greed fueling philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have stifling growth. That's our category. So how Congress is, I guess they're worried about how will we inhibit you guys from...
Well, and that was the interesting piece, I think, was the fact that these Congress people, part of their preface on a lot of these questions was, we don't want to get in your way. You know, like we don't want to do the wrong thing so that we actually make this worse, because we're really talking about American exceptionalism. We want to continue to be the leader, everything. And we're not right now.
No.
We're at risk of losing our democracy. There's a lot of crap going on, you know? So I think the Congress people were very respectful of reiterating the fact that they don't want to overregulate this thing because it will stifle innovation.
Yeah. And I think Brooks said it too, is he kind of explains really well, but he also presents a call to action. And he says, you know, Fidelity has to go to Canada to get a crypto ETF. Why is that?
Yep.
Basically saying other countries are doing it right. This is what they're doing. Let's get going on this.
Yeah.
Let's make these.
We're behind.
We have pages of regulations that you can use.
Yeah.
Here, we'll spoon feed it to you.
Here's all the stuff.
Here's the
you
stuff.
can use USDC coin.
Sign off on it.
Just use it. Like do all. Yeah. Here's all the stuff you need.
Yeah.
You know, but you got to study for it. You got to study for the test, right? Here are all the notes.
But we're gonna give you the answers.
We wrote all the notes for your test.
Yeah.
But you got to. It
actually,
is.
It's the nerd in high school is like, here, just
I'm gonna help you work on this test. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tutor you.
It's a group project, but I did all the work.
Exactly. Which, is there anything better? No, nothing.
So then we got to talk about barriers to entry, creating opportunities for mutual funds, diversification, managing risk, bringing more people in more safely is important. Not just for the rich people. So I think Brooks was talking about this. He's like, you could easily make it no risk for the general public and only allow the rich to get in and get richer because they can handle the risk.
Right.
But then we're stifling innovation, we're stifling growth, and we're defeating the purpose of this whole market in general.
Yeah. Well, so Brooks talked about the stock market and how, you know, there are these safeguards and education and diversification. And how do you get people who are unaware of the market, people, you know, retirement accounts, all of these things that are commonplace now in the stock market. Why can't we translate that to the crypto market? And what he talked about was the most important thing was parity, and it, you know, explained as like, why is one thing okay and another thing is not okay? And so the example they used was traveler's checks. So I don't know if that's a reference that people understand. A traveler's check is like old school money. If you were going on vacation to a foreign country, you would go to your bank and you would buy traveler's checks. And what you would do is they would give you, like, let's say it's $100 traveler's check. They give you a $100 traveler's check. You stand there, you sign your name on the traveler's check. You take that traveler's check with you on your vacation. If that traveler's check is stolen, then they'll replace it. But you got to prove that you did that whole process. If you have cash, obviously, if it gets stolen, it's gone. So that's why traveler's checks are safer. And so you spend that money in the place that takes your traveler's checks, if they take traveler's checks, and then you get change back in that currency. So it's a convoluted way of saying, if traveler's checks are still okay, why isn't USDC okay? Because it does all that, but way more efficient.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that Brooks was the idea that there's so many things that the stock market offers and that you can invest in the stock market that's commonplace. But the crypto market doesn't have those options yet because it needs this regulation. It needs to be put on paper.
Yeah.
Or on the ledger, if you will.
I like that. Yeah. And he basically was like, new doesn't mean more risky. Let people invest. Let people in. Let's make this easier.
Yes.
Especially with like ETFs or having crypto in your 401k.
Exactly.
You know, people want this. Let's make it easier.
Yep.
Let them in, he said, right?
Huge.
And so that brings us to regulating. How do we regulate this? Congress was asking that. What are your literally asking them, what do you recommend we do?
Well, and I think the other piece of this distinction is the Congress is in charge of writing the rules. Then you have the agencies that are in charge of enforcing the rules. So right now you have the SEC and the CFTC we've talked about, right? Is that I believe there's three regulating three regulating organizations that oversee the banking system and 5 regulators that oversee the investment banking system. So there's too many. The Coinbase CEO said there's too many regulators. We can't, and the fact that it's not a national currency, crypto, is that they have to have all of these licenses in all of these states and all of these other countries and all this. So it's super cumbersome.
Yeah, the FTX CEO is saying that they have over 100 different documents of saying that they're following these laws. And
so the CEO of Coinbase said there's too many regulators. We need to have one regulator. So whether that's a new regulator or something that already exists, the SEC and CFTC. And what was funny was that Bankman-Fried, the FTX guy, said, well, I think we should, put them together, put the CFTC and SEC, have them work together. And I was like, I don't know. I heard that somewhere. Maybe it was a couple of weeks ago on the Be Your Own Bank podcast. But that was cool to hear that from, a physics
PhD from MIT.
MIT.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. The point being is they want to be regulated. They're already regulated, but they want to have somebody. They want to have a liaison. They want to have a regulating body, and they also want to have an SRO, which
self-regulatory organization. So on the stock market, the NYSE, you've heard of it, New York Stock Exchange, that's an SRO. So the crypto market is wanting to have an SRO, and what that would do would be they would be their main liaison. They would be what's the quote? Get in the weeds and move with speed. They need an SRO that will get in the weeds and move with speed.
Right. So somebody who can be there on a daily basis, because we've talked about it, like this stuff changes constantly.
Yeah. And there's new coins being added to the lexicon every single day.
And they have to vet all those coins.
Yep.
And Coinbase has a process for doing that. And they've even set up the Crypto Ratings Council. So we talked about the SEC, the Securities
and Exchange Commission.
They have the Howey test, and they have the Reeves test is a new one. I haven't looked into that. But Coinbase is like, yeah, we're doing the Howey test, we're doing the Reeves test, we're doing our crypto council, we're rating all these things, we're checking their blockchains, we're checking their founders, they're
everything.
Doing thorough.
They have
analysis.
over 100 assets, and each one of them has to pass a rigorous test in terms of risk mitigation, so that they know that when they list this coin, their clients can trust that it's passed a test to make sure that it's a good asset.
They're doing more work than the SEC and the CFTC is doing currently. Yeah. So their work will lay the groundwork for this new regulation. So it's this partnership. It's just, that's what's so cool about this hearing, was that it was really these experts saying, look, we got it. We figured it out. Everything works. All we need now is the approval and the regulation so that everybody can have easy access to this, and we can implement all these things so that America can be best.
America could be best. Yeah. And going back to stablecoins, they're saying the most important thing to regulate is actually stablecoins to start with. So we can maintain dollar dominance, and then it making sure, having someone audit be there to make sure that the reserves are backed, in fact, 1-to-1.
Right. Is a third party. I mean, that was one of the last questions, was what is the number one regulation that needs to happen right away to get started? And that's what they said, is we need to make sure that stable coins are regulated 1-to-1, and that there's a third party who's auditing that process, so that we always know that a stable coin is a liquid asset and you can get your dollar out of that stable coin at any point in time. So there's no risk.
No risk. And pure trust.
And they said that earlier, was there is no risk. And so now we just have to write that down and regulate and legislate that.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds easy to me.
Sounds great. Let's make it happen.
So that's 5 hours of testimony for you in a shorter amount of time. Hopefully, I don't know how long this has been, but it's cool, man. I'm more invigorated by this.
I'm invigorated, but I'm also validated.
And validated.
Yeah.
On the blockchain.
On the blockchain. I felt like a lot of these questions they were asking, I was like, I can answer that.
I can answer that.
Let me be on this panel. How can I help?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's it. That's a good point, right? It's how can I help? When people are like, well, what's crypto? I'm overwhelmed by crypto. It's like, well, how can I help? And a lot of the times I help too much.
Sure.
They're not ready to receive that information at the time. But that's what I've felt about this community. It's not a, hey, let's get rich quick. Let's, Ponzi scheme, blah, blah, blah.
Buy 1 million Mongoose coin.
I mean, I will say that NFTs are a slippery slope just because of the way they're being interacted with currently. But I think just on the whole, the market itself is very inclusive. And I'm proud of that. And I'm constantly trying to, learn more so that I can help more people and give them the tools, and seeing these, just seeing the happiness of these conversations, and thank you so much for the question. Oh, thank you for letting me expound on the question. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for letting me clarify the question. Oh.
But not only that, saying, oh, well, thank you, Mr. Congressperson. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
There's rapport, there's history, and it's positive.
Yep. And they know this is the answer. So that's it for the hearing. Now let's get into those charts. All right, let's take a look at Bitcoin. So we are hitting this support right here at about 47.5, right around that area. That is coinciding with 3 support levels. We have this upward channel here in red. That is the bottom of the support. We have the top of the green channel here. That was previous resistance and now has become support, and as well as the 200-day moving average is also support. So we are on support, heavy support right here. If we do decide to go lower, it could go back to 30. I don't anticipate that, but it is definitely still in the cards. So the other thing we are looking at is the resistance, the former resistance. Now it broke out of resistance and is coming back to touch support. So typically what happens is it comes back, it touches support, and then it heads back up. But like I said, we could fail here, and that would send us back down to about 40. And then if 40 is compromised, we could be heading back to 30. Now, I know everybody's been talking about Lambos and 100x coins and all that stuff this year. I was personally pretty optimistic that this year would follow 2017. because of the 4-year market cycles. But when it comes to the markets, you have to be reactive and not predictive. It's looking like we won't hit that 100,000 this year. Sad face. But what it is looking like is a longer market cycle. So if we go back with each halving, so halvings are about every 4 years. So the market cycles have been going every 4 years or so. So let's take a look back a couple halvings ago. I'm going to take you back in time to 11/26/12, where the halving happened, and the Bitcoin price at that point in time was $12. Would have been nice to get in at that point, huh? And then we have the top over here. Oh, wait, no, we don't have the top here. The top of this cycle was here. So imagine if you had gotten in, sold here and stayed out, you would have missed out on all of this gain, right? Think about that. So the top was 11/30/13, which was 12 months roughly. So from $12 to $1,163 in 12 months. That was the first halving to top of market. The following halving was on 6/6/16. Bitcoin price was $574. The following bull market brought us up to 4,700 about. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't. It was 19,660. That was the 2017. So you can see what I'm doing here, right? Is that it seems like it was the top when it grew so much, but really it wasn't. And the top hadn't blown off yet. So just keep track of that. So the difference between the first market cycle from 2012 to 2013 and the 2016 to 2017 market cycle was about 6 months. So the second cycle was 6 months longer. And now we're into this third cycle where the previous halving happened on 5/11/2020 and Bitcoin price was 81.80. So 18 months from 5/11/20 would put us right about where we're at now. But if the market cycle is longer, then we haven't seen the top yet, and we've got about 6 months before we see the top. So my prediction is that this is a longer market cycle. We've gone from a 12-month cycle to an 18-month cycle, and now potentially a 24-month cycle. It could be longer, it could be shorter. The fact that we didn't hit the top yet doesn't mean that we're going down, is what I'm saying. Is the chances of the cycle just taking longer are higher and that we haven't seen the top yet. So definitely something to be considering. We could go down. We could chop for a while, but patience is key in these markets. And Bitcoin surprises people every single time. Be cautious, but be optimistic and just continue to put in a little bit at a time. So with that being said, let's go to our dollar cost averaging. Now, yes, the market has been beat up a bit, so I'm going to give you some of the ones that have been beat up the most, I believe. We've got EOS. I know we talked about it either last week or the week before. That's right at the bottom, at the lows that it's been. So I believe that it is a good buying opportunity. Then next we have NEO. NEO is right around $25 right now. Seems to be at the bottom. And then lastly, Dash. Same situation. Obviously, a lot of these coins have been beat up over the last couple weeks. Feel free to pick a few more to dollar cost average or wait for more confirmation that we are heading back up and be patient. That's it for the charts, gang. We are the Bit Bros. We are not licensed financial advisors. All content is intended for educational purposes only. Do your own research and only risk what you're willing to lose. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Please feel free to comment. It helps us figure out what you guys are wanting to learn and gives us an opportunity to interact and learn more ourselves too. So thanks for tuning in.